Yes, it's still going strong. In this era of streaming, mainstream cable television is slowly finding itself unable to keep up with the always on-demand entertainment. This hasn't slowed The Walking Dead down any. Much like the walkers within the series, this show refuses to die. People love it. We once covered this series in one of our previous timelines, but I feel like we could stand to cover it again since new content has been released. The final season is here, supposedly, and soon enough all we'll have left is Fear the Walking Dead. I'm sure that'll suck for most of you, not because Fear the Walking Dead is bad, but because you'll be down a show. That time slot forever lost to the void of non-zombie drama. And so, to celebrate the show and give it the send-off it deserves, let's cover the newest season up to this point in our timeline. Much like the last timeline, we're not going to cover Fear the Walking Dead because that series is long enough to deserve its own timeline. So get your machetes and shotgun axes because we're going walker hunting. Pre-outbreak. In World War II, Rick Grimes' grandfather was a soldier. He fought against the Germans on the Western Front. During this time, he had very little faith in his survival, but he did end up surviving. I guess that surprised him. For a while, Rick would ask his grandfather about things he did in the war, including if he had killed any Germans. His grandfather would always shoot him down, telling him that this was adult stuff. But nonetheless, Rick would learn from his grandfather's experiences that would help him to survive in the future. Merle and Daryl, on the other hand, had a crappy childhood. At a young age, their home burns down and they lose their mother. Their father is an abusive a-hole who doesn't keep track of his sons very well. This is shown when Daryl disappears for 9 days and the father didn't even seem to notice. Merle eventually moves out after having enough, leaving Daryl alone with their father, who heaps a double portion of abuse on his last remaining family member. Eventually, Daryl and Merle meet up again and go back to being brothers. Delinquent, drug-addicted brothers. Oh, happy days. The Green family, 150 years prior to the outbreak, buys the farm. No, I mean they literally buy a farm. Herschel ends up in charge of it, but he's an alcoholic, until his daughter's born. Then he's not. Herschel's first wife dies, but you can't keep a good farmer down, so he remarries and has another daughter named Beth. There's also Sean, but you don't really need to bother with him. Michonne lives with her boyfriend Mike and their son Andre. 131 days before the outbreak, the CDC encounters their first strain of the zombo virus. They name it Wildfire and decide, let's experiment with it and let it into dead bodies. Elsewhere, Ranger Rick is a cop who lives with his wife Lori and his son Carl. One day, while on duty, Rick is shot and falls into a coma. Shane tells this to Lori and decides to keep an eye and other body parts on Lori during Rick's absence. This is when the outbreak begins to make the news. Outbreaks start to day 83, days gone by. The zombo epidemic becomes a zombo pandemic. It's everywhere now. Shane goes and rescues Rick, who's still comatose. Suddenly the military shows up and starts the prologue of Metal Gear Solid 5 Phantom Pain, but this time for reals. Shane barricades the door and hoofs it with Rick to a refugee camp. However, they're caught in gridlock and get to watch the military drop jungle juice on Atlanta Vietnam style, which kills all escaping patients. This is totally out of the realm of reality, and this is how we know the show is fake. The military would never do that, right? With nowhere else to go, Shane and company set up shop in an old quarry outside the city. Carol Peltier and her family join them there. Elsewhere in Baltimore, Lydia and her parents are hiding in an emergency shelter. Weeks go by and nobody comes for them, and so Lydia's mom goes bonkers, kills her husband, and takes Lydia. In another place, Michonne, Mike, and Andre, now along with Terry, go to a refugee camp, but that camp is later attacked by creepers, which ends in Andre's death. She blames Mike and Terry for it, so she pulls out a freaking samurai sword and cuts off their arms and jaws, deciding to use them as zombie bait. Brutal. Rick, having survived, wakes up in the middle of a Scarowinds commercial and is just about as confused as you can imagine. He's taken in by Dwayne and Morgan Jones, who give him a short recap of the series thus far to help him realize that everyone died while he was in a coma. I mean, imagine waking up from a coma in this. They go get more guns and part ways. Rick decides to go to Atlanta and find his family, but instead he finds a bigger gun. A freaking tank. Too bad he's trapped inside of it because zombies. Rick gets a nice radio call from a guy named Glenn who Rick teams up with. With the help of Glenn, Rick gets back to his family. Happy times. Well, except for Lori, who is suddenly regretting letting Shane keep his eye and other various body parts on her. Everyone's on cloud 9, but suddenly, zombie. The entire camp gets attacked by the Walking Dead and Carol's husband gets eaten. The survivors of the previous survivors decide to go to the CDC to live there, thinking they'll be safe from the disease. How cute their tiny smooth brains are. Dr. Jenner says they're all zombos now and decides to blow up everything. They try to escape through a deserted highway, but, you know, zombos. They're everywhere in this show. You might as well name the series after... oh wait, Anyway, Sophia disappears into the woods and Carl gets shot. They rush him to Herschel's farm for medical care and the entire group relocates. Guess what? There are zombos on the farm, but nobody knows. Don't tell anyone. Shane shoots Otis, and Glenn and Maggie Green decide to do the dirty. Lori reveals the truth to Rick that she and Shane have been getting cozy in the cone together, and Rick is obviously pissed. Anyway, after a lot of stuff happens, including the killing of a guy named Randall, Shane pulls a gun on Rick, and so Rick pulls a knife and kills him. Carl then re-kills Shane because zombies are a thing here. The gunshot attracts more walkers, and the Green family farm is burned to the ground. Day 84 to 321, Rise of the Governor. Andrea and Michonne end up meeting up. These two stay together for the rest of the season. I mean, if you meet a lady who has survived on her own, enslaved zombies, and carries a samurai sword, you'd stick with her too. Rick and the rest of the group decide to take shelter in a prison. While there, Herschel gets bitten by a walker, which ends with him getting his leg cut off. While in prison, they find that there are still prisoners. No need to talk to them though. They get the axe. Zombos show up and kill T-Dog and Lori. Maggie performs a C-section to save the baby. Rick then re-kills his dead wife because zombie. Michonne and Andrea come upon a town known as Woodbury that is run by a man who is only known as the Governor. Merle is there, and now he has a badass sword arm and works for the Governor. Michonne doesn't trust the guy, but Andrea does, and so the two go their separate ways, with Michonne leaving town. However, she's hunted down by Merle and Red Shirts. Glenn and Maggie get captured instead, so Michonne tells Rick at the prison. Michonne later finds the government's zombified daughter in the basement. Michonne and the government fight, but due to the roughhousing, someone loses an eye. The Governor now hates Rick's group, but Andrea doesn't, so she decides to play peacemaker to set up a meeting between Rick and the Governor. The Governor tells Rick that the only way to prevent the war is to give up Michonne, but Rick doesn't, and so the Governator decides to attack them, but Rick and company are ready for it, and so a battle erupts and Rick's group wins. Huzzah! Andrea's bitten. Boo! She dies, and Rick decides to take the rest of the people from Woodbury into his group. Day 321 to 554. Life among them. The Governor don't got no friends, so he finds Tara Chandler and her family and sweet talks them. His supervillain eye patch doesn't dissuade them at all, and he convinces them to attack the prison. Dwayne Jones died, and so Morgan has lost his mind and wanders alone. He meets a man and a goat and learns karate. Back at the prison, Rick feels like retiring from being in the apocalypse and wants to be a farmer. All is peaceful until day 500 of the apocalypse. They introduce a new questionnaire intended to test survivors. How many walkers have you killed? How many people have you killed, and why? Mr. the Governor shows up again with his new army and begins to destroy the prison, and the group is torn apart. Oh yeah, he cuts off Herschel's head with a samurai sword. But they get the Governor killed, so Herschel has been avenged. Everyone after this has their own little one-off adventures. Beth is captured by cops and wakes up in a hospital. In the end, all of them are led to Terminus, where they find not a falling moon and a mentally unstable Russian squat dancing mass demon who try to eat Rick and his friends, but they fricked with the wrong people and all die. Meanwhile, Morgan and his karate masters are still living their best lives until zombies show up and eat the karate man and the goat, leaving Morgan alone to continue his journey. They meet a priest and try to rescue Beth. This leads them to Grady Memorial Hospital, but Beth dies anyway. Rick and company are rescued by Aaron, and he takes them to the Alexandria safe zone. Day 584 to 628, All-Out War. The group is settling into Alexandria, and Carl gets shot in the eye. Fun. Rick and Michonne end up shipping. A member of a neighboring hilltop colony warns them of a rival faction known as the Saviors. The Saviors fleece the hilltop colony in exchange for not killing them, and thus Rick and his group are enlisted to deal with these people. Rick and company attack a Savior outpost, and Carol kills people by catching them on fire. She's not okay about that. She decides to leave the group because she doesn't want to be a part of the cycle of violence any longer. Meanwhile, the Saviors learn about the outpost and come knocking. They capture Rick and take him to their leader, Negan, who has that cliche baseball bat that he named Lucille that he took to Glenn and Abraham. The group quickly changes sides and joins Negan because they don't want to get Glenn and Abrahamed. After a week though, Michonne says they can't keep this up and tells Rick to instigate a rebellion. Meanwhile, Carol and Morgan discover a settlement known as the Kingdom, led by a guy with a tiger. Morgan is always running into characters with animal sidekicks. I half expect him to show up in a Disney princess movie now. Tara discovers Oceanside and Heath is gone. Rick decides to convince other colonies to team up against Negan, but nobody does. Spencer tries to get into Negan's good graces, but Negan stabs him instead. Rosita shoots at Negan, but Negan deflects the thing with his baseball bat like a Jedi Knight or something. This reveals that Eugene can make bullets, and so the Saviors snag him for use. Rosita is still upset because Negan isn't a walker yet, so she teams up with Sasha and the two sneak into the sanctuary. Sasha is captured, but Eugene gives her a cyanide pill, which she uses to turn into a walker and attack Negan. This doesn't kill Negan though, but Carl does start blasting like a badass. Negan puts down this little rebellion, but before he can kill Carl, the Hilltop Colony and the Kingdom rush in guns blazing. After this, the Coalition decide to go to war against Negan, and to do that, they're just gonna smash some outposts before attacking Sanctuary. Maggie takes over as a leader of the Hillside Colony and teams up with Georgie, a lady who is from a community with technology and stuff. The Kingdom takes heavy losses and Carl dies, but he dies because of Zombo, not war. As the final battle draws near, Eugene sabotages the Saviors' bullets and destroys their weapons as Oceanside starts raining fire on them. Rick and Negan fight, but Rick comes out on top when he slices Negan's neck. Negan doesn't die though because Rick decides he doesn't want to kill him. Day 628 to 1448, The Bridge. Lydia and her mother meet Beta in an abandoned hospital. They all kill some walkers and decide to start the Whispers together. This group of people are the kind that wear zombie masks and pretend to be zombies because I guess zombies attack you when they see that you're alive. It's probably not by smell or any other primal sense, they just see you and they're like, hey, that guy's alive, brains! During this time, Morgan decides to leave the show and join the spin-off. The remaining saviors join the militia and end up under Daryl. Meanwhile, because Negan is still alive, everyone's on edge, and Rick doesn't care because he's too busy building a bridge. Nobody but Rick wants it, starting to feel like Rick's lost his leadership skills. Maggie has a baby now that she names after Herschel. She decides that she wants to Glenn and Abraham Negan, but she also decides to spare him because Negan is now a sad husk. Also, remember that bridge that Rick forced them all to make against their will? Yeah, well, walkers are crossing it now and attack the community. Leadership skills. Also, Rick is impaled because even his horse disagrees with him now. Rick has a dramatic death scene where he shoots the explosives and blows up the bridge along with the walkers, but turns out it's all for naught because Rick doesn't die. Instead, he gets rescued and airlifted. Daryl and Michonne look for Rick along the riverbank, but only find his badass revolver. It's then that Michonne meets up with her old friend Jocelyn, who is general of an army of rugrats. Michonne then kills all the kids and gets traumatized by it and locks down Alexandria. Day 1448 at 3607. The Whisperer War. 6-year time skip. Alexandria is still locked down and the kingdom starts falling apart. Daryl and his dog decide to leave, and Maggie and Georgie are off doing their own thing as well, and Michonne gives birth to Rick's child. Ezekiel wants to save the kingdom by planning a fair, but it's a question whether Michonne will let Alexandria participate. Judith, though, she decides it's time to open Alexandria's doors again and takes it upon herself to make sure it happens. She invites some new cast members into Alexandria. Michonne isn't happy about this. Daryl and his group encounter the Whisperers. They capture Alpha's daughter, though, Lydia. While in prison, Lydia ships with Henry. Alpha doesn't like that, so she sneaks into the fair and kidnaps Sadiq, Tara, Enid, Henry, and 7 other nameless cast members. She then decapitates them in front of Sadiq. Alpha puts the heads of those she killed in a pike, and Daryl discovers the walker horde that the Whisperers have been gathering. A few months pass, and then Alexandria invites a new group of survivors featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series. Dante joins Sadiq in the infirmary. After the events of the fair, the kingdom crashes, and so does Carol and Ezekiel's romance. Months pass by, and the colonies have become a single group dedicated to stopping the rise of more villains like Negan. Rosita gives birth to her own and Sadiq's baby, Coco. Judith later finds a Whisperer mask washed up on the beach. Everyone gets into a lather about it, including Carol, who wishes to get vengeance for Henry's death. After this, the water supply is poisoned and many people get sick. Sadiq discovers Dante's treachery but is killed before he can say anything. Daryl has been meeting with a Whisperer to find the secret base of Alpha, and Michonne sets sail for a naval base to collect supplies. Daryl leads a group of fighters to where he found the walkers, but finds it barren save for Alpha, who leads them into a trap. The group makes their way through the cave, and after finding some faulty dynamite, Carol sets it off in an attempt to kill all the walkers. Most of the team except for Connie and Magna escape. Negan then informs Alpha of Gamma's possible betrayal, and to say thank you for his help, she and he, well, Negan gets to keep an eye on other body parts on Alpha for a little while. Gamma comes to Alexandria to tell everyone what happened, but is instead put in jail. Daryl tries to find a way back into the cave, but instead finds Alpha. The two fight, and both are critically wounded. Lydia saves Daryl, and Alpha apparently pulls a Goku and gets a Zenkai boost. Beta invades Alexandria via secret tunnels and attacks many citizens. Gamma offers to leave with him if he leaves now, but instead he just leaves because he's outnumbered. Eugene then learns the mysterious radio person's name, Stephanie, and Alpha and the Whisperers plan their attack. Carol and Daryl make up, and Alexandria prepares for attack. The Whisperers attack Hilltop by torching it with flammable tree sap. As Hilltop burns, Judith kills a Whisperer that she thought was a walker, and this affects her until Earl shows up and takes her away. Magna escapes by pretending to be a walker, but Connie's fate is unknown. While luring walkers away from Alden and Kelly, Gamma is found and killed by Beta. Earl, after getting the children to safety, dies from being bitten by a walker and is then re-killed by Judith thereafter. Negan then lures Alpha to a cabin, claiming that Lydia's inside. However, he decapitates her after it's revealed that he was working with Carol. I guess she wasn't stronger than ever, huh? Michonne arrives at the naval base with Virgil. I am the storm that's approaching. They find no weapons, and it's shown to be a trap. Virgil drugs her, and during her time under the shroom, she dreams a what-if about siding with the Saviors. She then comes to and stabs Virgil, but doesn't kill him after discovering that Rick Grimes may still be alive. She tells Judith this along with her hopes to find him. Negan tries to convince Daryl that he killed Alpha, but this isn't proven until after he kills more Whisperers who want to make him the new Alpha. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Beta is basically Alan Jackson and plays his own record to call some walkers to him. He then pulls an Optimus and removes Alpha's face to use as a mask. Also, Eugene and friends go to meet Stephanie. However, Princess scares off their horses and offers to lead them to a transport. Meanwhile, Beta leads the horde to Alexandria, but it's empty. The Alexandrians are living in a hospital, and so Beta decides to head there. The hospital is surrounded and Beatrice is killed. However, Daryl and some others attempt to lead the walkers away with loud music on a wagon, but Whisperers destroy it. Daryl and the others then kill the Whisperers and wound Beta, who is then eaten by walkers. They then lead the walkers off a cliff. Maggie then later shows up and gets a massive recap of the season thus far. Daryl and the others follow Maggie back to her safe haven, but it turns out that the haven isn't very safe because everyone is dead and little baby Herschel is missing. They're then informed of the Reapers, and everyone else is killed too besides Daryl and Maggie, but they get Herschel back. Yay. They then make their way to Alexandria. Daryl then goes hunting and doesn't want Carol to come, but she comes anyway. They find a cabin that Daryl remembers from after he left Alexandria with a dog. Turns out he found the dog's owner and began shipping with her until they had an argument and never saw each other again. He then blames Carol for Connie's fate, and they fight before going their separate ways. Aaron and Gabriel go to a storehouse only to find it empty. The next day, they're captured by a man named Maze who forces the two to play Russian roulette. They try to convince Maze that not everyone is evil, but he instead tells them what he did to his family. In the end, Gabriel kills Maze with Aaron's mace, and they find his captive brother and dead family upstairs. They attempt to free the brother, but he commits suicide instead. Eugene and the others end up captured by a strange military force and are placed in boxcars. During this time, Princess ends up getting a splinter that gives her PTSD. She then begins to see Ezekiel everywhere, but he's just a hallucination. She ends up interrogating a soldier, but the group ends up captured again. After Carol and Daryl split up, Carol goes back to Alexandria and makes soup, because soup makes everything better. Then she begins doing all sorts of things to help the community, such as fix the solar panels and catch the rats getting into their grain. Meanwhile, Daryl's bike breaks down and he ends up fighting walkers wearing armor. He eventually returns to Alexandria, where he and Carol have a small passing conversation, but the two are still not in the mood to be pals. Negan is banished to Leah's cabin for his own safety, and while there he gets a character development flashback designed to make us like him, but never forget that he beat Glenn and Abraham to death. He is still bad. Bad man. Don't listen to his stories. Alexandria's food is running out, and so Maggie leads a group to find more. However, they end up in a subway station and surrounded by walkers. They attempt to escape up a ladder, but Negan abandons her and she falls. See, I told you that he was still a bad man. Eugene and his friends manage to escape from the Commonwealth. However, Yumiko realizes her brother might be with them and elects to stay behind. Maggie manages to reunite with the rest of the group and reveals Negan's treachery. They later find Roy and Gage, who had run off with their supplies. He begs Maggie to save him, but she refuses and he kills himself before he's devoured. Roy is found by Daryl, but is later killed when the new threat to make the season more attractive shows up, the Reapers. Yumiko asks for faster processing, and Eugene does as well. The Commonwealth auditors then introduce them to a woman named Stephanie. The Reapers then ambush Maggie's group and kills Cole and Duncan, causing their team to scatter. Maggie ends up meeting up with Negan and Alden. However, Alden is wounded and asks to be left behind. Maggie and Negan go on by themselves. Carol and some of the others find the lost horses, and so Carol decides to kill one of the horses to make food for the starving people. I would mention horse meat here, but considering we've run into cannibals by now and watched Rick bite a man's throat out, this just doesn't seem as bad. Daryl and his dog are separated from each other, but Daryl finds Dog with one of the Reapers, a woman revealed to be his old flame, Leah. He's then taken to Meridian, where he's tortured by the group. He divulges only minimal info to appease the group's leader, Pope, who then locks him and Leah in a shed and sets it on fire. The two escape, and Pope changes tunes, telling Daryl that he's welcome to join them. Daryl is slightly mistrusting of Pope, though, because he tried to burn him alive, obviously. Carol and friends go to the remains of the Hilltop Colony, where they find a few surviving Whisperers. Aaron tortures them for information, and nearly kills their leader, but Carol stops him. The leader divulges that Connie is alive, and tells them where to find her. Carol and her group decide to go looking for her the next day. Yumiko ends up finding her brother Tommy, and Eugene and Stephanie are arrested, but then freed when the deputy governor orders it. Negan and Maggie end up hiding in a house where they plan to wait for the others. They're later joined by Gabriel and Elijah. Connie and Virgil are surviving together when they stumble upon a mansion full of cannibals. Damn, I had to say something, didn't I? They manage to defeat the cannibals while Carol and her group show up to help them. Elsewhere, Daryl is forced to torture Frost for some info regarding Maggie's group, and Daryl then attempts to sabotage the Reapers while they search for Maggie. When they return to Meridian, they find that Pope killed Frost after further interrogation. Eugene and Stephanie are sentenced to community service and have to clear walkers from buildings. They manage to save Sebastian, the son of the governor, but when the boy is a prick about it, Eugene knocks his block off and gets put in jail. Lance offers to let him out if he gives up Alexandria's location. Negan then teaches Maggie how to command walkers like a whisperer. A storm brews, then destroys many of the walls of Alexandria. This allows walkers to get into the village. Elsewhere, Carol is surprised and disgusted by how little Pope values his own men's life. This is shown when he tries to fire one of those whatchamacallits at both Walker and Reaper alike, but Leah kills him finally and takes command of the Reapers. However, Daryl outs his allegiance to Maggie and her group, and so she turns the weapon on them. The Walkers are killed by the Whatcha, and Maggie and Daryl escape. They capture Carver and offer to trade him back. In the end, Maggie kills all the Reapers except for Leah. Negan also bites the dust because he knows Maggie will never get over him until he's dead, and he doesn't want to deal with her crap anymore. They return to Alexandria to see it weather the storm. However, it isn't much longer until Eugene leads the Commonwealth to Alexandria. After a 6-month time skip, it's shown that Daryl is working with the Commonwealth and has the Hilltop Colony, of which Maggie is leading the survivors there, and a confrontation begins. A month after Alexandria enters Commonwealth, Daryl and Rosita try to join the military. Most of Alexandria realizes how sophisticated Commonwealth is and has a hard time adjusting to it. They go to a gala, but a disgraced soldier, Tyler Davis, takes Max hostage so he can talk with the governor, but he flees instead. Daryl convinces him to surrender, but allows Sebastian to take credit for it. Eugene then gets all lovey-dovey with Stephanie, but she's not feeling it and decides to ditch him. He searches for her tirelessly and discovers that she wasn't even named Stephanie, but instead Shira, and was placed in the group under Lane due to too many inconsistencies during the auditing process. However, Eugene is confronted by a woman named Max who reveals herself to be the real Stephanie all along. Max reveals that she broke protocol to talk to him like she had, and her brother Mercer had to cover for her, which meant that she needed to stay silent when Shira was impersonating her with Eugene. Eugene is all hurt and storms off, but later they come back and begin to ship. Governor Milton tours Alexandria and the other territories, where she butts heads with Maggie over leadership qualities. As such, many people in the Hilltop Colony abandon her for Commonwealth. Ezekiel is then sent into surgery to remove a tumor, being moved up the list by Lance as a special favor to Carol. Aaron and Gabriel are sent alongside Toby Carlson to a neighboring complex to offer them membership to the Commonwealth, but the leader Ian refuses. Toby murders him and reveals that his job was to eradicate the complex after they were accused of destroying a Commonwealth caravan. But guess what? That bastard Negan lives here now. He sends a message to Maggie, who sends troops to attack the Commonwealth. Sebastian forces Daryl and Rosita to get some money for him from a Walker-infested building. There they encounter April, who dies. Mercer kills 2 troopers loyal to Sebastian and tells Daryl to deliver the money to Sebastian, else he fears retribution. It's revealed that Negan married Annie, and they help Aaron and the others defend the complex. They then kill Carlson. However, Herschel Rhee, who stowed away on a truck, appears and forces Negan to confess to the murder of his father and nearly kills him before being talked down. Also, it was revealed that it was Leah who had raided the Commonwealth caravan. Lance questions Aaron and the others, and later questions those at the Hilltop Colony, but is threatened by Maggie and Elijah. Mercer and Princess start, well, let's just skip them for now. Ezekiel opens a clinic to help those far down in the list and enlists Tommy to help him, so that's great. Lance knows he's getting nowhere with Maggie and decides to just take over through force. He also orders Daryl, Aaron, and Gabriel's deaths. Their soldiers betray them, but they narrowly escape. Maggie then leaves Herschel with Negan and Annie while she prepares for war. However, she's kidnapped by Leah, and Daryl shows up to save her, killing Leah. Max convinces the members of Alexandria to post an article about Governor Milton's lies, and Lance takes over Alexandria, Hilltop Colony, and Oceanside, where he flips a coin to decide the latter's fate. Lance then hunts down Daryl, but Daryl is rescued by Negan. Daryl sends Negan to spy for him in Commonwealth. While there, he's captured by Mercer, who interrogates him, causing Negan to reveal his identity. Meanwhile, after a group of rogue citizens begin hunting Sebastian, Governor Milton, desperate, strikes up a deal with Carol, who is sent to deliver Sebastian back to his mother safely. However, underground, they're caught in a standoff. Well, I think that's it, at least until the next episodes drop. A few probably have by the time you've seen this video. Anyway, what do you think the ending will be? I bet everyone dies. They probably all die, right? What do you think, though? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe to Cinematica for more content like this. Be sure to ring the bell so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching. Peace out.